Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Planning Board on March 15th, 2023. We start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, so please stand and join with me. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Couple of housekeeping items to deal with. The Planning Board voluntarily continues to offer remote participation. If any member of the Planning Board participates remotely, votes shall be by roll call. Thank you, Liz, because this used to be a huge paragraph at one time. Okay. For those in the audience, I'd appreciate it if anybody has any cell phones or electronic devices, if you put them on mute or vibrate. Also, we have an emergency exit in the back. There's one to my right. Please don't use the elevator, so that somebody will be assisted to help you get down. Prior to introducing the board, I want to publicly thank Mr. Jim McCaffrey, my vice chair, and also Dave Grenice on their election win of last night. So this will be their last meeting, and they've been here for a long time and have an unbelievable knowledge there. So good luck to you on the town council. So with that, congrats.
Thank you. Thank you.
So moving on, we have the director, George Cioris.
Good evening.
In the back there, we have the assistant director. We have Liz Robideau.
Good evening.
We have the town administrator representative, Randy Chase.
Good evening.
We have full member, Mr. Dave Grenice.
Good evening.
We have the vice chairman, Mr. Jim McCaffrey.
Evening.
And way over to the left, the guy behind the curtain, is Mr. Owen Preventure.
Good evening.
We do have sitting in the audience, one of our alternates, Chris Feinhauer. And then we have the town engineer, Mr. LaRue. Good evening. And then we have the full member, Mr. Andy Myers.
Hi.
We have full member, Mr. Mark Connors.
Good evening.
And sitting in for Joe Temper, who's absent tonight, is Mr. Malaby.
Malaby.
And my
Unforgettable.
secretary is Mr. Nelson.
Good evening.
I'm the chair, John O'Connor. So with that, there's no escrow. We have approval of minutes for March 15th, March 1st, 2023.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve the minutes of March 1st, 2023.
Second.
So we have a motion, we have a second. Any questions, any changes? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
I abstain. I wasn't here.
Did you get that, Liz? Correspondence, Mr. Secretary.
We have in our package the most recent copy of Town and City, publication of the Municipal Association. That'll be on file in the planning office.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is to schedule a public hearing to discuss proposed amendments to the Town of Derry zoning ordinance, Article XIX, Independent Adult Community Overlay District. And we have a motion that needs to be read.
Okay, which one? Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move to schedule a public hearing to discuss amendments to the Town of Derry zoning ordinance, Article 19, Independent Adult Community Overlay District, for April 5th, 2023.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any questions? I think we pretty much vetted this in the past, so with that, that will be scheduled, Judge,
April 5th.
April 5th.
Oh, you have to vote. You have to vote on that motion.
Oh, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain. Thank you, Liz. We have an architectural design review, PID 30051, 16 Manning Street, Unit 103, Poppy's Apothecary, a new sign in the traditional business overlay district.
Mr. Chairman, staff would recommend approval. It's pretty straightforward. It's right outside our building here at 16 Manning Street. It's in the TBOD, as you said, so that zone requires the planning board to review the sign, and staff would recommend approval.
Mr. Chairman, this is very straightforward. It looks like it's just replacing an existing sign with a new business on it. So I'm going to make a motion to accept the architectural design review for PID 30051, 16 Manning Street, Unit 103, Poppy's Apothecary, with the new sign as provided in the motion of March 15th, 2023.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any questions? Mr. Connors?
I was just curious, apothecary these days. What tells a little bit about that, George?
We had this discussion in the office, and for some of us remember that somebody said that they were pharmacists or drugstores many years ago.
Yeah.
This isn't.
This isn't?
No.
Liz? Okay, I'm being good.
So my understanding is this will be more like crystals and that type of.
Okay, healing stuff, but
Yeah,
non-medical.
Yeah, alternative
med-
healing,
Oh, cool.
that type of.
Nice, cool.
New age, yeah.
I'm kind of bummed
It's
that
pharmacy and drugstores years
kind of
ago.
bummed that Backscatter East is closing, since I'm probably the only scuba diver ever went in there, but they've never been open, so I can't go in there anymore.
Any other further questions?
I have a quick question.
Oh, sorry.
Just a really quick question, Mr. Chairman. I think it's pretty obvious, but is this one of those situations where it's just a fit-in sign, they really can't vary the dimensions anyhow? Oh, I'm sorry. Is this one of those situations where they really just can't vary the dimensions anyhow?
Yes.
Pretty much.
And is it,
much.
and the colors have to be a certain color scheme? Is that the way it is?
No, I mean, they picked that, but that building has just always been that way, and you're right, you can see it's limited on the space and the size it can be, but,
So there's really nothing they can do anyhow? This is just a formality?
yeah, and when you change a sign,
Specifications
right.
In the LDCR, for signs and
Thank
everything? How many square feet and so forth?
Okay.
Okay, anybody else? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? This moves on. Congratulations, whoever's opening a business there. Okay, the Town of Derry, PID 02020, 38-53, Transfer Lane, pursuant to RSA 674:54, governmental use of land. Review of proposed solar installation on public land. And George, before I turn it over, this is, actually, I'm going to address the board for transparency. As a state rep, former state rep, I co-signed and sponsored many of these net metering bills. And I also sit on the net zero committee for the last 3 or 4 years. So even though this is non-binding, that if somebody wants me to be recused or recuse myself from here, then I would be willing to step down.
Yeah, so
No issue with
happy
me.
to have your expertise.
Thank you. So, George, would you introduce Mr. Fowler? I'm
Yeah, I
assuming?
can do that real quickly. And I told Owen, we've had several calls, so there were people that are going to be zooming in tonight, Owen, and I chatted. So some people are down in Florida, so I alerted Owen to that, just in case, okay? I'm going to turn over to Mike Fowler. Mike's going to introduce his team, and he's been working on this project. And so Mike's going to come up, and I know there's going to be some stuff on the screen, and he has some people out in Zoom land that he'd like to introduce as well, so.
And Owen, I can't see if anybody's on the screen, so let me know if somebody pops up on there.
Do we want to read the number? Just to remind me.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, Liz had a great point for Owen, too. Could you read the phone number again for the people that are going to zoom in? I gave them on the phone earlier today, but just in case they call in. Because they may call versus zooming in.
Okay, I'm going to read this slowly. The phone number is 646-558-8656. And you enter the meeting ID, which is 754-663-3666. 912. Get it? Good evening, Mr. Fowler.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Mike Fowler. I'm the Public Works Director for the town of Derry. Tonight, we're going to talk about the landfill parcel that's located off of Kendall Pond Road. It's a large parcel that the town has both its municipal facilities and also a capped landfill, which has a cell tower site on it. Municipal facilities include wastewater treatment plant, transfer station, highway, vehicle maintenance, and other facilities. This project has been kind of a thought that has gone through the Net Zero Committee, and before that, the remnants of the Energy Committee. And I want to introduce Jeff Moulton. I think he's in the back here. He and the group from the Net Zero Task Force have spearheaded this project from day one. They've looked at a number of alternate sites and have done a tremendous job at coming up with the solution, and I can tell you that they've really poured their heart into this project. I also want to introduce a couple of people. I believe that they're online from the team, Encore Renewable Energy. There should be Katie Hines and Ralph Mima. They both will be participating if we have any questions towards the latter part of my presentation. And then one of their subcontractors who was working on the site plan and the environmental work from Sanborn Head is Eddie Galvin. So as we go along, I'll go through our presentation. I've got probably about 8 or 9 slides, and then we can take it from there. So let me start with the brief story and talk about what we're planning to do. I believe all the members of the planning board have received a site plan, and we also had reached out to all of the abutters within a normal radius. So we're treating this as if it's a normal abutter outreach. So as I had mentioned before, Net Zero Task Force had been looking to try to find ways to create sustainable energy for the town of Derry. And this location was prime because the town really didn't have any use for this particular site. We maintain the site, we cut the grass, we take care of the drainage and any items, but it's a dormant capped landfill. There were some thoughts way back about 20 years ago for using it for athletic and recreation fields. That didn't pan out due to some concerns about settlement and otherwise. In 2018, those of you that have been to our transfer station, we built a small scale. It had 10 tracker units. That produces 150,000 kilowatt hours annually, and it saves the town about $20,000 per year. So it's been a really successful small scale project. So the Net Zero Committee and the Department of Public Works had been looking for another way to go to a larger scale project. One of the things that had prevented us from looking at the landfill many years back, and John, you were instrumental in working to try to get that net metering cap increased, was we had a constraint of 1 megawatt. And so we went out and looked to see if we could make it feasible on the landfill, and it just didn't work out financially. So that was about 6 or 7 years ago. Then the legislature and the governor signed the bill to increase the net metering cap to 5 megawatts. So this project now became much more feasible. So town went out to bid in late 2021. It was a competitive bid process to try to solicit proposals to build a 2.2 megawatt solar panel array at the town-owned landfill. Went through a number of meetings to review with members of the Net Zero Task Force. Tom Carden, Mike Fodeman, Jeff Moulton, and I all sat through a number, and we had some great proposals. And we gave the town council an option whether or not we wanted to do a land lease where the town could enter into a power purchase agreement, or to go in and do a full outright purchase. So we presented both to the town council. Their thought was, let's lock into a fixed electricity rate, let's enter into a land lease, and ultimately out of this, we decided on going with Encore Renewable Energy, and they're headquartered in Burlington, Vermont. So That process was taken care of in late 2021 and in early 2022. So since then, Encore has been working on the technical items, including getting an interconnection agreement. It's fairly complex what has to be done to bring this forth to Eversource to make sure that they can accept any excess power. But the goal of this project is to provide all of our DPW facilities and also 29 other buildings within the town, whether or not it's Derry Public Library, this building, with a contract which will provide it with energy at a fixed rate on the supply side of 6.8 cents per kilowatt hour for a 25-year period. So one of the things that's important is we've always done in public works, we've saved, probably well over, $1 million and a half in the 15 years or so that we've done competitive energy supplies. And unfortunately, those numbers are starting to come to an end. If you look at your bill that you have from Eversource right now, your supply price, if you're still on their default, is about 20 cents per kilowatt hour. So this would be about a third of the cost for what you would be paying from from Eversource. So we believe it's a really, really good deal for the town, and also it's a sustainable energy, given that it won't be using fossil fuels to build. So some of the items that we're going to be looking to talk about tonight is where this is going to be situated on the landfill, some of the items that we need to look at. So tonight's goal is to inform the planning board and its obligation to review this use of governmental under 67454. And we've done this before on when we built the transfer station, I think when we put the sign up in front of Adams. So we'll visit the planning board periodically to conform with those regulations. So essentially, let me move forward on this. Oh, do I have control on this, or?
Yes, with the arrows.
With the arrows, okay. Hopefully I won't screw anything up on the Zoom. All right, so let me just jump into it. So I've already talked about introductions, but let me just give a quick project overview. So if you look at this, this aerial, you can see there's in kind of a orange, yellow color, that's Interstate 93 northbound and southbound. The darker colors, that's the Derry wastewater treatment plant. Immediately to the south, to the east, you've got the closed landfill. And then obviously a little bit further to the north is our transfer station and all the DPW items. In between where all that, there's some vegetation that shows up very dark. That is Beaver Brook, and there's some areas that will need to be crossed through there. So we'll talk about some of the permitting that's required. But basically, if you look where it says closed landfill, the idea would be to install roughly 6,900 fixed solar panels. So these will be, because of the sensitivity of the landfill, we cannot puncture the lining. You need to put down, or what will be put down in the design is a ballast. So it's a concrete foundation, basically, that will withstand any wind pressures, and those will sit on top of the landfill. And then they will be interconnected, wired together, and then essentially everything will be sent on a pole line to the wastewater treatment plant, where then it will be fed to the buildings, and then any off-site excess production will then go off-site and then be distributed elsewhere in the grid. And then through our agreement, we're going to be getting the fixed rate at 6.8 cents, as I had mentioned earlier. If you look at the landfill, there's two portions of the landfill. The southernmost, closest to 93, has a really steep slope, so it's shaped like a dome. That area was not deemed to be feasible because of the steep slopes that are presented there. So basically, in the area where it shows closed Derry landfill, the proposal is to fit those solar panels in horizontal rows on about 12 acres of that particular area. So it'll all be enclosed within the fenced area of the landfill, and then bounded by the Beaver Brook on the west side. All right. Some of the other items that we are in the middle of taking on or tackling, once we've cleared this step through the planning board, there are multiple permits that the design team will be working on. The next step will be going forth with the solid waste modification permit, alteration of terrain, wetlands, and then shoreland protection. So all of those permits will be, we're in consultation with New Hampshire DES, and we'll be filing those shortly, provided, there's any feedback this evening. And then we'll talk a little bit about the anticipated schedule a little further on in this presentation. All right. So, Owen, I'm locked up here for some reason. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is a little better illustration of where the panels will be located. As I had mentioned, these are basically going to be running east-west, but the orientation of the panels will be south to southwest facing, because that is the manner in which you're going to capture the highest degree of solar. And so they're going to be positioned in that direction. As we had mentioned, it's a 2.2 megawatt solar array. We're looking to, or these panels will create and generate roughly between 3.6 and 3.8 million kilowatt hours a year. Not all of that will be used instantaneously by our facilities, because obviously our wastewater treatment plant runs 24/7. There's pumps that run, but obviously our other operations aren't running 24/7, usually during the year, during the summer and during the spring. So that area is, the power that's produced will be then put into the grid that we don't use. So we talked about how this would offset power for the wastewater treatment plant. It's been sized so that it would match up with what the demand is on that particular site. So there's been a lot of electrical engineering that's gone on, a lot of site visits, and that's pretty intricate as far as trying to match that up. 12 acres of area that will be covered by these solar panels. They'll be on ballast foundations. Within the site, there's existing stormwater utilities. We will be analyzing if there's any adverse effects in a post-construction condition that have to be managed. But essentially what will happen is anything that hits those solar panels will just sheet flow and either infiltrate into the existing top of the cap or sheet flow towards kind of the west. And we'll show that in just a second. And then the other part of this is if you look to the upper part of the drawing, there's some green and orange lines, really faint, that run adjacent to one of the lagoons at the wastewater treatment plant. That will be the aerial pole line. So basically, it'll look just like any other line, wooden poles that would be 45 feet tall, span wire that would run across Beaver Brook, poles on both sides, anchors as necessary, and then connect to the wastewater treatment plant. All right, I'll go to the next slide. Here's some details. I don't think this is of any interest to anybody, but just for history, landfill was closed in 1986 in that section. It's a cap system. It does capture passive methane gas. It's not a high level of production. That particular landfill is monitored annually, and we submit reports to New Hampshire DES relative to groundwater. And that will continue under this. And we do have to file a modification permit because the landfill is being modified, so there'll be a type 1 or type 2 application that will be going to New Hampshire DES solid waste. Again, as I had mentioned, stormwater management, this is just a preliminary mapping, but essentially we have the roots of how the existing landfill sheets. And we essentially will be looking probably down at the northwest portion. There'll be some form of an infiltration basin. So we'll work out the details on the stormwater calculations and submit that for review to New Hampshire DES. But essentially, we don't envision any adverse impacts, particularly even towards the Kendall Pond roadside. Everything should sheet flow to the natural course that's there now. Okay, and this is, again, another just detailed plan showing the solar arrays, and then each one of those colors represent the slope of the particular area there. So again, all of this will be incorporated into our AOT permit submission. Runoff calculations will be provided. There is a preliminary runoff increase, and then we'll mitigate that through the infiltration basin. So all that information will be prepared and then sent up to New Hampshire DES, and we'll respond to any comments accordingly. Again, as we go through the AOT, we're going to review a number of different items. The team from Sanborn Head has done some extensive investigations of wildlife, looking at the conditions that are existing on the site. And so they will be looking at the infiltration basin, potentially the building of another one, and then any requirements that may or may not come back from New Hampshire Fish and Game. So we'll manage all of those as we move forward. Again, this is an insert view as we get closer to the wastewater treatment plant. What you see there is, in the darker blue, is the 100-year floodplain for the Beaver Brook. And so we have to be sensitive to that. We're going to be very limited in the tree cutting that's going to be applied in terms of running that aerial across there. That'll be something that the state will be looking at as we review it. In terms of wetland impacts, we don't have any anticipated wetland impacts because the poles will be set back outside of those sensitive areas. But again, there'll be some secondary impacts, such as some tree clearing. And then the other thing that we have to be concerned about is if there's any impacts to vernal pools. So the design team has consulted with Normando Associates to review that, and again, that will all be submitted as part of the package that goes to New Hampshire DES. So pretty intricate, to say the least, in terms of trying to tie together the electrical requirements, the structural requirements, all the environmental requirements, and then to schedule this. And so I'll talk a little bit more about where we are on the schedule, I think, in the next slide. Oh, okay, no, I'm wrong here. One slide off. This is just a little bit more of a detailed area as we get closer to the wastewater treatment plant. You can see in the white, there's identified areas of where the equipment will be. Right now, if you go down, there's a road behind animal control off of Fordway. And it's just a gravel road that goes out and provides the town with access. Sometimes we have to do maintenance. That gravel road will be the access point so that anybody in the future can get to any of the equipment. But essentially that area, all the equipment that's going to be required to tie in is going to be on the wastewater treatment plant side as opposed to the Kendall Pond Road side. So everything will be tied in with poles crossing the stream, as I had mentioned before, and then the area will span just over the top of the slope for the town's wastewater lagoon. One other item that I'll point out, down there is a rubble pile that the Department of Public Works has kept and maintained. I think a lot of it actually is rubble from when the town had the sewer project extended along Rockingham Road. For those of you who can remember, when the Speedway, Dunkin' Donuts, and the Rite Aid went in, there was an extension of sewer. I think we went down as far as Bradford Street, so I'm thinking this is back around 2007. All those concrete decks that were there, the old road base, had to be pulled up, and those are stored there with some other materials. There's about 8,500 cubic yards of material that the town also seeks to process into some type of gravel. So there's an ancillary effect of recycling that will be going on, but we have to move some of that pile, hopefully all of it, for the path of the aerial to get through there. And again, that's on the other side over by the wastewater treatment plant. All right, let's talk about schedule. So we participated in a pre-application meeting with New Hampshire DES on February 23rd, 2023. We thought the next logical step was to come to the Derry Planning Board tonight. Coming out of this, as I had mentioned before, the design team is working towards getting all those permit applications submitted to DES by June 1, 2023. Simultaneously, they're going to be working on getting the equipment lined up and taking that forward. We don't know exactly how long some of the lead times will be for New Hampshire DES, but Right now, and this may be somewhat conservative, construction looking to begin somewhere in Q2 of 2024. And if everything from a supply chain standpoint, because some of the items such as transformers have a really long lead time right now, and obviously our storm yesterday didn't help out in terms of that. But what we're hearing is there's some things that have to be ordered well in advance. If this all goes into play the right way, we're looking at having this in operation by Q1 of 2025. It is our hope that that can be expedited into Q4 of 2024 or even earlier. So we'll update accordingly. But again, that has some bearing as far as how quickly the permits are turned around at DES and obviously how they can or can't get the equipment. So when this is all said and done, as I had mentioned before, the town takes all of that electricity. You see it in our bill, and basically it's going to be a huge savings over what the default rate is going to be. So I think this project hits a number of boxes when it comes to being sensitive to the taxpayer, sensitive to the environment, and reusing an area that really wouldn't have changed appreciably if this project hadn't been put forth. So I think there's a number of positives to this, and I think from there, if there's any questions, what I can do is we have the team that I had introduced. They're all online, so I might have to pass those along if there's some detailed technical questions. And I know there's some abutters here who may or may not have some questions tonight regarding this. So with that, I can hand it back to the chair.
Okay, well, typically, this is not a public hearing, but since we do have abutters here, and we are going to take somebody on the phone, anybody wishing to come, I don't think the board has any objections to inviting anybody that has any questions would like to come up?
Should we make a motion or just do it?
No, it's not. I saw a lot of heads nodding, so.
I'll sit right next to you.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
All right. My name is Robert Brown. I live at 1 Michael Avenue in Derry, New Hampshire, which is right across the street from the landfill. And I have been there since when the landfill was opened. And I have sat through multiple meetings with the town during that time as far as the closure of the landfill and the promises that were made to the surrounding abutters.
Into the mic.
Oh,
Is that better? And during those planning meetings, there were quite a few plans discussed on how we would buffer the look of the landfill from the abutters. That was with tall fences to keep trash from blowing around. That was with a tree line to block the view of it, which honestly never happened. We ended up with a 7-foot high fence, not a 20-foot high fence, which was originally proposed. We ended up with a few trees, not in front of the landfill, but down towards where you put a new commercial building. And now it looks like, in this plan, if I understand looking at the drawings correctly, you're going to take those trees out. So my question to the board is, what are you doing for the abutters?
well, when you're finished, we're going to have Mr. Fowler address those.
So that is my question.
So
Oh, okay, thank you.
So again, part of this process tonight, we can look at this two ways. One, we want to be sensitive to the neighbors. I don't have any issue with either setting up individual appointments with you and others, or, coming out of this tonight, talking about some ideas of what we can and can't do out there. I mean, obviously the landfill, one of the requirements from an electrical standpoint is that there has to be a 6-foot tall chain link fence. So I think we've met that. And I know those trees that are on Kendall Pond Road are not contiguous, right? There's some gaps in that fence. But I guess one of the questions that I would have is, for you and any of the other abutters, would it be something that you're looking to have a row of arborvitaes? I mean, what I'm trying to judge is what's the ask? What would be something that would meet some of those requirements? Because I think that's one of the steps of what we're doing here tonight. We've been managing this project kind of internally, and now this is an opportunity for the community to come back with some ideas and see how we might be able to work that.
So what I hear you saying is you're answering a question with a question. There is not a plan at this point in time for any type of buffer zone between the solar panels and the abutters. Is that?
That is correct.
Okay. And now you're asking the abutters, and hopefully there's a lot of them online today that might chime in, what they would like to see.
Yes.
Okay, that doesn't sound like a plan to me. I'm sorry, gentlemen, but it doesn't sound like you've thought that part of the process through.
No, and so,
Sounds like you've focused on what the benefit will be to the town and what is required to get the maximum amount of solar penetration to the panels, and that's the removing of the trees, to generate as much electricity as possible. But yet I haven't heard anything as far as, from a community standpoint, what you're doing for the local taxpayers that sit around this facility at this point in time.
correct. And that's why, A, we're here tonight, and B, I said I've offered to be a part of any meeting that somebody wants to have in person out in the field. I'm available to do that at any point. Because thus far, what we've been working through is getting, like you said, looking at the logistics of this, looking at what the payback's going to be, going through the political process, going through the technical process. So that's where we are at this point.
Mr. Chair, would it be appropriate to have a question that relates to this now, or do you want to have all the public speak and then come to us?
I don't know how many more wants to come. Why don't we have all the public speak?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak?
Seeing none, rise online, Mr. Chair. We do have some folks that have dialed in with a phone who may want to instruct them that they wish to raise their hand or press star 9, those that have dialed in with a phone.
Okay, those that are on the phone out there, if you press star 9, your hand will show up on the screen and we'll introduce you and let you into the system so you can speak if you wish to.
We do have a hand raised at this time, Mr. Chair.
Does it have a name? Does the person have a name?
You know, we have a phone number with the last 3 digits of 797. We'll allow them to speak.
Okay, 797, when you were opened up, would you please introduce yourself?
Ask them to unmute.
And can you unmute yourself?
Star 6.
Star 6.
Star 6.
Star 6 mutes and unmutes.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, yeah. Hi. My name is Bill LaJoy, and I reside at 50 L Kendall Pond Road, and I'm also representing Donna Frederick at 50R Kendall Pond Road. I believe Mike Brown, who just discussed, just spoke to you, is actually right beside me in back. And thinking about this whole situation, I mean, I'd love to have you guys, save money for the town, and the solar project sounds good. But the thing is, we're right smack across the street from where you want to put these panels up on the hill. It's wide open to us. I look out my window every morning. I see coyotes. I see deer through this field. Now, I'm not against solar energy, but the thing is, these solar panels. Now I'm going to be looking out my window. I'm going to see nothing but glaring solar panels, and I'm sure the way the sun rises in the back of my house and the way it goes over it, they're going to be pointing in my direction. Now, there's got to be some type of glare, some type of mirror effect on our homes, and never mind, our view is going to be completely gone. So, and again, what Mike says, what is the town? The town's going to reap a lot of good things from this. I mean, fixed electric, leased land, you're making money. I doubt if our taxes go down because of this. Again, I'm going to ask what Mike asked, is what are you going to do for the abutters here? I mean, our property values are going to go down. I mean, it's not going to go up because of solar panels across the street. So, again, we need to discuss, what's going to happen to the abutters here. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fowler will be answering that.
And so, again, I hear your concerns about what the visual will look like. Again, one thing that I would be more than willing to offer is to either meet individually with each one of the abutters to kind of look at, ultimately, we can put some stakes out in the field to look at where those panels will be and also look at the visuals. I mean, you know, from the town's perspective, we do look at this as a tax positive product. And so it is a situation where you are definitely saving money compared to what the default rates are. And that puts you in the ability to, you know, save money. Does it reduce the tax rate? I'm not sure it does. But does it prevent you from having to deal with increases that you might have to lay off a firefighter, a police officer, a public works department employee? For sure that's the case. You know, so yeah, relative to the abutter concerns, if we're going to be looking at some trees, we may be able to do something with that. You know, that's something that I would want to get some consensus on, but certainly willing to have those discussions as part of this process.
Owen, are there any other questions while John's talking there, George?
Seeing none rise.
Oh, one in the audience?
I know. Hold on. Nobody on the phone.
Correct.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the audience?
Well,
Well, I believe you're associated with Mike, right?
yes.
So I'm going to hear from the audience first. Anybody else?
Nobody else on screen?
No. All right,
Seeing
check.
none, Mr. Chair.
And the other you folks, nobody? No? All set? Okay.
Yeah, Jeff Moulton, 5 Taylor Brook Lane, Chair of the Net Zero. There was a glare analysis done. I think he had brought up the issue that the panels would be, you know, shining on his house and stuff. And the vendor's already completed a glare analysis, so I don't know if they're on that they could talk about it, but they don't believe there would be any impact from that perspective.
And that was one of my-
Katie, are you online to Katie Hines from Encore?
Yes, I am online, Mike.
All right. So you've been following the discussion about the glare. Could you provide a little insight on kind of where you guys have looked at that?
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple of lines I would address with that. So first, the manufacturer in their data sheets guarantees no glare from the panels. And then second, from a maximizing energy production standpoint, we really don't want glare coming off of the panels like that. I know that neighbors don't want that. We don't want that either as the developer and the long-term owner of the project working with the town, because any light that's reflected from the panels is not being absorbed to then be converted into electricity. And as far as the wildlife concerns go, Encore as a company typically uses wildlife-friendly fences. I think they're called ag fences in a lot of places, but typically it's wooden posts, and we flip the fence, the actual mesh wire, so the larger openings are at the bottom, so wildlife can get in and out easily and still, you know, run around in any fields that our projects are on.
Question from the chair for the Encore. Your experiences throughout the New England area, what are you finding that when a solar panel array is put up, how is it impacting the regional property taxes or the house values?
I don't know anything about house values. I know that property taxes for the parcel itself can go up. And in some leases that we have, that is on the owner to pay annually, that difference, the raised property taxes. And then in other cases, we have a pilot agreement with the landowner or with the town, which is a payment in lieu of taxes, where we make a large lump sum payment up front at the beginning of the project's operation.
Mr. Chair, just a clarification on that. When you're saying the taxes go up, you're not referring to the taxes of people around it, but the property owner where you're leasing from a private owner, and this is a public municipal property, so there wouldn't be additional taxes to the town, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that's correct.
So there
My
should not
apologies.
be
Yes.
any
So the
tax
idea is
impact.
that the assessed value of the property that the panels are on increases, so then the property taxes increases, right? Like if you have an open field and then you build a house tax on it. That field's value has not now increased.
Gotcha.
It's kind of the
But-
same idea with,
Right, so-
different values.
But buildings around that could have some other type of impact. Okay, thank you. I have some other questions once we're ready to come back to us. Go
ahead.
So the reflectivity was one I actually put, at the top of my list, knowing drive down this street all the time, as I'm sure we all do. So I also want a little bit of a history lesson because I'm only been here for 20 years. So the landfill's been there since I was. The homes that are across the street from this property, were those built while this was a landfill? Were those built, did they exist prior to the landfill being there? Does anybody have that history? Because
I know.
okay.
Mr. Brown will know.
I can answer that question. All of those houses.
Mr. Brown, can you just come up? You're on TV,
Come up to the mic
please.
if you would, just so it's on the record.
All of those houses, the ones on Michael Avenue, that whole development, and all the houses that go down the side of Kendall Pond Road were built during the time of an active landfill.
So that was an open, active landfill at that point?
That is correct.
So you were looking at an open, active landfill versus what's there now?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
And there were multiple meetings, as I mentioned before, about the proper closure of the landfill.
Right.
And the impact that it would have on the surrounding neighbors,
And I-
which never
But
came to be.
I would assume you're happier with what it is now than when it was an open landfill, right? Or not? I mean,
I am.
I would be.
I am, but I will state that the town of Derry, besides having an active landfill, has taken advantage of the local residents by putting in a shooting range over there that we have to listen to gunfire from 6, 7 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, twice a year, when the police department recertifies their officers, okay? Now we're talking about putting in a solar panel array of, 6,900 panels, which everybody here is saying will not have any glare effect. I find that strange to have somebody say on 6,900 panels, you're not going to get some type of glare. And I don't see any planning here as far as the neighbors. I see a very extensive presentation that you're giving to me about transmission lines, where everything's going to sit,
So-
balances for the solar panels, but one key component, I'm going to keep talking, so bear with me.
Well, I asked you a question, that's why you came up again. You spoke already. so I
That
just
key
wanna-
component that should have happened as part of this proposal at the beginning of the project has not been done.
Okay.
And now you're offering to do it after the fact, and I find that,
Well-
honestly, just backwards from a normal business proposal.
Okay, all right. And I guess, I have some other questions that may be,
Mr.
Okay.
McCaffrey.
Okay. So, Mike, you mentioned, again, having been there, the landfill cap is up. So it's a hill across the street that you're now looking at, when you're on Kendall Pond Road there. My question is, there are no trees, as the gentleman said, along that fence. And if we were to plant, because you're saying that the town or the builders is open to looking at potentially building trees. If you were to put any kind of screening trees there, would there be an effect or a negative? I assume you're taking down some of these trees to the south because they're going to block some of they're pretty tall and they're going to block some of the panels is the problem.
Correct.
If you were to put, like you're saying, 8-foot, 10-foot arborvitaes along the fence, that's not necessarily going to affect, or would it affect the project at all? And also from a neighbor standpoint, I guess those still aren't necessarily high enough to,
Right.
because it's going to be raised up. So even planting trees would take 40 or 50 years for them to be tall enough anyway, right? Okay. Okay, so how tall, I guess my point is, how tall could something be before it was impacting or negative to the project? Do we know that?
Right. No, we don't. And I think that's where the engineering comes into play here. In other words, looking at, number one, can you meet the screening and buffering requests? Number two, are there any effects? Because again, part of this process may be that if we decide, let's look at modifying where those panels are. We have the opportunity to maybe move some of the panels, up, shorten the rows up if there's a need to look at that. So I think, that's where we go to Encore and we say, okay, how does this affect the project, but how can we manage this? That happens all the time in all the engineering projects we do.
And the trees that are being removed are down by, I forget the name of the company, that crop of trees, because I did go and look at all of this, that really is not, even if those trees come down, to the gentleman's point, to me, the real problem is that whole length of fence that's already there. They're not going to impact any homes by taking those trees down. It doesn't appear to me anyway. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think you're right, Mark.
Yeah. So, okay. And I guess the last question along the same line, because I think, my major concern about this is the homeowners across the street. And when I looked at this, I'm thinking, what's it going to look like? I've seen a lot of these big solar arrays, and I guess one of the things that maybe you could do, or maybe the company could do, is there's farms and stuff around New Hampshire that have quite large solar arrays, and the units themselves, at least what I've seen, and maybe do you know what the height of those are going to be? Because they don't seem to be real tall like the movable ones that we installed. They're lower, maybe 3, 4, 5 feet, 6 feet high.
I don't think they're that short. Katie, can you provide just some insight on what the height, because there is an angle that
Right.
they have to be. They're not straight up. They're
Right.
going to be positioned so that they can maximize sun exposure. But Katie, could you provide a response to that?
Yep. So typically in New England states, there's a requirement to have the panels up a certain distance for the snow load, just so the snow at its height. In theory, I know y'all got a lot of snow in the past couple of days with the snowstorm, but in theory, the snow stays below the panels, and that distance is 3 feet in Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire. So then the higher end of the panel is typically 8 to 12 feet tall, depending on the racking system that we use. We have not chosen a racking system at this point because we're early in design. Wanted to get y'all's feedback before we move forward with that decision.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me go over to, before I go over to Mr. McCackeren.
Can I make one comment? Just one correction. When you talk about the landfill, you have to understand that it's at multiple different elevations.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So part of it is higher at the beginning of the landfill if you're coming down, heading towards Londonderry.
Right.
About a third of that before you get to this mound that he's talking about, that's at ground level, that's at road level. So there is not going to be any type of buffering in that area. So you go from a very high, maybe, 20-foot high bank,
Yeah, something like that.
okay, and then it drops down to right where Michael Avenue is, to ground level, and goes from there all the way down to where that big mound is.
So in that case, an arborvitae or something could provide some visual protection then?
Never will provide the protection, because it's going to be at road level. And any of the other houses that are in that area sit higher than.
Oh, the houses are up on the other side too, you're right.
Okay.
Okay, gotcha. Okay,
So-
yep, thank you.
A small arborvitae is not going to do a single thing. It's not going to be any
Yeah.
higher than the fences that you have there already.
Correct. That's where I was
Okay.
going with it too. Thank
So
you.
that's something that has to be considered if you're going to do something to try to block some of the view. There is different elevations involved.
Okay, thank you. But I wanted to make an announcement that for the public and for the board members here, that we have no purview over this whatsoever. And again, just want to make that clear, but we have so many days that we can make solutions and recommendations sent over to Michael from the planning board itself.
I understand that, but as a
Well, that's for the
planning
board,
board,
that's for everybody.
as a planning board member, you have to consider the facts as presented to you, and there are some relevant facts that are missing in this proposal at this point in time.
And the planning board has no purview over it, sir, sorry.
So
But we can make recommendations, though. Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have a legal question and then a technical question. And the legal question addresses your assertion we have no jurisdiction, and I just want to clarify that. I'm looking at 67454, and there are really two subparagraphs that talk about review of municipal development. There's subsection 2 and subsection 2A. The one that applies is determined based on a definition that appears in Roman subsection 1, and it says that if it's for a public purpose, which is statutorily or traditionally governmental in nature, Roman 2 applies, Otherwise, Roman 2A applies. And so I guess I'm asking a legal question of staff. Have we made the determination that the creation of a solar energy electrical generation facility is either a statutory or a traditional government use?
No, I think to answer your question, David, it's not a governmental use. I mean, that's why the statute was written that way. So a couple of things. They're here because it is a non-governmental jurisdiction in the sense it's not a governing body. So they do have to come here for the informational meeting. So the way we looked at it is the planning board will have what you do tonight, non-binding. You have 30 days to determine if you want informational questions based on how Roman numeral 2 was laid out. And then it's up to the planning board. It says shall be subject to local land use regulations, which is Roman numeral 2A. The board can give comments, and then the board can make a determination if they want to see more additional information. That's a possibility if you wanted to do that. But to answer your basic question, right, they are someone leasing the property based on that law. It says that you should comply to government regulations. I won't disagree with that.
So if that is the case, if the interpretation is it's not a traditional government use,
right,
even though it's a really good thing, then 2A applies, and it says shall be fully subject to local land use regulations, as if it were not a governmental use.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think, Mike and I have talked, and Liz have talked the last year. The only things I can recall in my career here is that when the schools came in, the school district came in with different buildings over the years, they came in for informational only. I think when the McGregor Library added an addition, they came to us for informational, to the planning board, I should say. I'm trying to think of like other situations, like Mike said, the sign on the Opera House, the Adams Memorial Building was one. We have 2 cell towers that came here, that's located on town properties at the fire station at the Rotary, and also down on Kendall Pond Road. So the law changed. I said to John and Mike earlier, when I started many years ago, that Roman numeral 2A was not in there. It just said that you came for an informational meeting only. The legislature changed it to include Roman numeral 2A because the town could lease the land. So the question really is going to be, does the planning board is satisfied you've asked your questions, you have 30 days to give Mike your questions and your comments, or if you want to take it further, you could technically provide some kind of a public hearing or a more formal process if you want to do that.
I think it's important to sort this out. I don't want to slow anything down. Mm-hmm. It sounds like there's plenty of time in the schedule for engineering, and we're not going to break around tomorrow. But I remember last time I was on the planning board, there was a development, and the board thought they were being very business-friendly by waiving any kind of formal site plan review, and there were years of lawsuits that resulted from that. So if indeed this is not a traditional or statutory governmental use, and we agree that 2A applies, one reading of that is it has to go through the normal review process for any commercial development. Doesn't mean that we have to do that, but it suggests that that is the appropriate standard, and if any abutter is aggrieved and we take a shortcut and we do an informational where the law calls out that it should have been a full site plan review, I think we are opening ourselves up for future lawsuits, and I just want to make sure before we go too far down the road that we clarify that.
Can I add something to you? This is a possibility, a compromise. Where he and I and you and Liz are meeting with the lawyer on Friday.
Right.
Land use lawyer. Can we bounce this off of him too?
Yeah, I would be okay with that. Just separate for the rest of the planning board member. Planning board members. We're working on some of the downtown zoning, so we always get legal reviews when we make zoning amendments. So Liz and John and myself and Dave Nelson are going to meet Friday with our attorney to look at the downtown zoning. Matt Surge is the attorney. He's a land use lawyer on planning and zoning boards. He's an expert on it. I have no problem asking Matt that question.
So just to add onto it and to take Dave's step further, and Mike, maybe this was looked at, just if if we went the non-lease option and the town was kind of purchasing the equipment and putting it on, then it would not be a 2A, it would be,
Well, it depends on whether you
But two,
determine
correct?
being a utility is a governmental, traditional governmental use.
well, I guess that's what I'm saying. So was this already looked at and like, the 2 would apply if we, I guess, the panels could still be put there without having that issue if it was government-owned or not?
I can tell you that the town council didn't look at the way that it would go through the planning board. It looked at the economics. It looked at, it's going to cost $4.5 million to either put the panels in, or we can lease them and take a PPA agreement at what I've talked about before. That was really the only consideration, not the zoning and not the planning board process.
Will you be doing a pilot also with them?
That has already been arranged, yes. That's been approved.
So I think Mr. Soros's idea is good to get early on a legal opinion. I'm not trying to force anyone to take a particular path. All I'm suggesting is if we take the wrong path and we, have the decision end up in court, that would not suit anyone. So we just need to make sure we're doing the right thing as we go forward. That's my concern.
Yeah, and if I may, Mr. Chairman, I think, and like I said, Mike and I and Liz have talked about this, and I hear what Mr. Brown is saying, and that's a great question. The legislature wrote that law on purpose to give feedback within 30 days, whether it's from this board or the abutters. So you guys, whatever you can provide, if your questions or comments tonight, that's for the record. We have Mr. Brown, we have a couple of people on Zoom. So that's the feedback that Mike needs to go back and tell his engineers that you may have to add stuff to this plan. As I'm just using, again, Mr. Brown on the buffer as an example. So any feedback tonight and comments within the next 30 days, you're following the law. We provide that information to Mike.
Okay. Let's talk about this offline, because I think we're maybe talking, but I do have a technical question. So, Mr. Fowler, given the lifetime of the solar array, how confident are you that there will never be a necessity to dig up and replace or maintain the ceiling layers of the cap during that lifetime?
So we understand that when the landfill cap was installed, that it had a 75-year lifespan. So this project is a 25-year agreement. The town has worked this out that if it chooses beyond the 25-year, it can extend at 5-year options as you see fit. I think what, ultimately we've seen a lot of advances in the technology for solar panels, and maybe in 10 years' time that this technology is going to be antiquated, right? But in terms of the cap, if there was a need to review, we're going to still have to monitor all of the parameters, the groundwater, the cap itself, any settlement. That's all still a town responsibility. So if there were to be a need to manage a specific area, we're on the hook for that, and we may have to move the panels, right? That doesn't sound that we would want to do that, but I also would say that if that has to be done, these are on ballast, so they're not into the ground. Mm-hmm. They're somewhat like Legos where you can move. Not easy to do, but if we had to manage that, it's there. Typically, that landfill cap, there's about at least 18 inches of material. There's a sandy layer, and then there's a loam layer that allows the grass to go there. So in my time, I've only seen a couple of times where the topsoil had slid a little bit, and we had to just come in and just put, a truckload of material on that. So we're going to have ongoing maintenance regardless of whether or not there's solar panels there or not.
But there is an impermeable membrane layer underneath all that, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
And so to that point, you just mentioned that only has a 75-year lifespan supposedly. So how far are we in on that membrane already? And is 25 years the end of life on that membrane, and then it has to be replaced anyway, or what are we looking at?
I believe the one section was capped in 86 and the other was capped in 97.
So is that just the guarantee? It's guaranteed for 75 years, or do we actually physically have to replace or recap a landfill?
No. I mean, it's just like anything else, like with a roof, right? Everybody says 30-year shingles.
Thank you. Okay.
Most of the time you get there, sometimes you don't.
Right.
But it comes down to the homeowner looking at it. In our case, we continue to maintain and monitor.
But I guess what I was going for is like a capital, is that already in our budget that at the end of that period, we're replacing an entire landfill cap or not?
Not in our CIP at this point, but that's
Okay.
something that a future director is going to have.
You won't be here.
Sir?
I had one
You've
more
had your
question.
questions.
John.
No. I want,
Oh, yeah, please, if someone else does, I didn't
Mr.
think anybody else
McCacken?
did.
Everybody go, I'll go at the end.
Okay.
So Mike, just again, the way these are raised and having seen these racks, you mentioned we currently mow and I see we mow it a couple times a summer. That's kind of like a haying operation. With these racks being there, I assume it still has to have some sort of mowing operation that becomes a little more complex. It might have to have handheld, weed whacker stuff between them. Is that still the town's responsibility? And I assume that's all been factored in.
It has been.
Okay.
And I think, for us, we're going to have to find the right size equipment. Like, for example, if we need to use a zero turn with a 42-inch deck as opposed to what we currently use, it may take us longer to actually do it. But then when you think some of the areas we normally would have mowed are going to be covered by a solar panel that, in a
Keeps the
ballast.
grass
So
down. Okay.
it may net out, but yes, we have talked and we will continue to consult because there'll be a certain spacing between each row, like 7 feet that we're going to try to maintain.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me.
I got a few questions here. As my former state rep, I was setting up the solar system for Brentwood, Rockingham County, but we had to delay it due to the fact there was an endangered bird that decided to nest there to have an eggs and then have her birds before she left. Is there any endangered species within this area?
No, I believe as part of our submission to DES, both I think the AOT and I believe the solid waste, there was a survey that was conducted. I don't believe anything endangered had come back. Eddie from Sanborn Head, can you confirm that is what has been done?
I can get back to you on that.
Yeah, Eddie, can you hear me, Eddie Galvin?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
So yeah, our sub, Norman Doe Associates, performed a preliminary natural resource survey report. And I don't believe that there was any species identified on site. It is a requirement within AOT that any project that requires alteration of terrain permitting now needs to go through the Fish and Game Department as well. So as we go through that process, they'll be involved throughout the way, dealing with any types of those species.
Is our conservation people going to be looking at this too?
Yeah, we haven't reached out to them as of yet because we're still working through some of the preliminary phases, but we'll touch base with with James and the DCC relative to what our plans are on this.
Okay. Anybody else, any questions before? Yes?
When others go, I have a couple more.
Anybody else?
Let them go.
So Mike, quick question. On the other side of the road where these homes exist, public right-of-way, public sidewalk easement, any space on that side of the road where trees can be planted in front of these homes on that side of the road to help these folks out over the next 20 or 30 years, but where it may not work across the street?
I would have to look. I think Kendall Pond Road is probably a 50-foot right-of-way. Again, that may be something that, as we discuss with
Something
the
to think
abutters,
about, just
yeah,
an
we
idea.
can chat about what might be feasible out there.
Just thinking, put it on their side of the road if we can instead, might help out, just an idea.
Okay, seeing anybody else? Screen, anybody on there?
Seeing none, rise.
And looks like I'm going to turn it over to Mr. McCacken.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Clearly you can hear some concerns here from some of the residents and the board members, and it sounds like you're going to get an answer to Mr. Nelson's question. I'm going to share some of the same concerns Mr. Nelson provided. In these instances where the government gets involved in projects, and this is clearly a good project, on the surface, but I think there needs to be a more prudent review done, and you should follow the normal planning board process in your thought process. Now, whether it comes here for a full review or not, let's wait and hear what the attorneys have to say. But I think it would be prudent to work with George and Liz and consider this as a full-blown project. which would include, some sort of reviews or meetings with citizens and things of that nature, or anything that George and Liz with their years of experience could provide you, so that you can answer a lot of these questions in advance. Sight lines and, a lot of things we would look for on a planning board is, has somebody gone out there, and probably in this site it's difficult because of what it is, but I guess you could put a baluster up and put some sticks there and see what the heights would look like, things of that nature. It's something we do all the time. We ask people to put some visuals up there so you can see what it looks like, and then you can get a perspective from that, and then you can go stand at the houses across the street, and you can see if, to Mark's point, putting something on the other side of the street might work, or what side. Doing some of those things is very prudent practice, and it's practical. I know it's a great idea, but you got to think beyond that, like it's a project that an individual company would try to put in place. And you have to be considerate of all of those particular elements. So I'd like to see you kind of go back and work with George and Liz, regardless of what the attorney says, whether it's a 54 subsection 2 or not, right? Those are the things you'd normally consider in any building project if you were a business doing this. And I think it's incumbent upon government to act like a business and not say, hey, we're the government, we can kind of come in and just do it. And you just got to be careful doing that. And I think you've done a great job. The presentation's fantastic, but we have to look at this whole thing, like I say, as a real business project. I would look for things like that. And what kind of screening can be involved. If it can, it can. If it can't, it can't. And then you're gonna have a reason for it. But have you shot any site distances? For example, what kind of solar arrays are there? Have you gone up on the hill and put some sticks in the air and looked at it and said, okay, this is what it looks like? Has any of that type of work been done? Just to get a visual?
We've walked the site, but we haven't done, the survey was conducted by Sanborn Head.
Right.
But in terms of standing there with a 10-foot
Yeah,
pole,
I'm
no,
just-
we haven't done that.
Yeah, I think some of those things are important, and have somebody be across the street and look at it, see what you can and can't see. A lot of it you're not going to be able to protect. You're just not, because it's on a big hill, right? But if there are things we can do to make it look a little nicer and a little more hidden, then, those things are valuable. And obviously, we're doing this for a financial reason for the town, so putting some money back into the project to be more protective of the neighborhood is also a good thing, and I think it needs to be considered. So my recommendation is, after you get the legal opinion, is to consider some of those aspects that are part of the normal planning process, and I would direct the Net Zero Committee to make sure that George and Liz are an active part of the committee to do that. That's my feedback.
Okay, one more question?
I just wondered, Mike, just out of curiosity,
Sir, you can go back in the audience, please.
I do have another question.
would anything else besides a solar array ever be allowed or capable of being built on top of a landfill cap like this, Mike? I was thinking of this as like a really great low impact, that the neighbor, quite honestly, being across from an active landfill, this is a step up. And I guess if those houses were there before it was a landfill or something, and then they had the landfill dumped on them, then, absolutely. So, but I'm beginning to understand a few of their concerns. Having a wonderful wide open field across from you, of course, is a positive, although that ugly chain link fence is there too. So as I looked at it, I didn't necessarily think of some of the things that these folks are bringing. If there truly is no reflectivity, a solar array is not the most beautiful thing in the world, but it's also not an active landfill. And so could buildings be built there? Can the town ever sell this land or something where something else even bigger or worse than a solar array could ever be there or not?
I think the fact that there's a landfill there and there's materials, I wouldn't paint it as an unstable, but you certainly would not want to look at putting, say, condominium complexes or anything like that. Sure. That was one of the reasons that when I first got here to Derry 18 years ago, there was a proposal or discussion, I guess, to build athletic fields. And one of the concerns were, if you were to grade this out to a level field, would that then settle? And then you'd be looking at, 2-foot divots in the middle of the field. That was a concern. So in terms of the town, I don't see us ever giving this property up. I just don't see, because of, it's a cap landfill.
Yeah.
So it doesn't probably have a high use. There's a few communities that have built golf courses on it, and they probably deal with a settlement.
Right.
I know in Quincy there's one
Yes.
that's like that. But for us, it's sat there dormant for as long as it's been capped. This was an idea that came forward as a result of using
Like I say, low impact use from what I was understanding, but the gentleman has definitely, the neighbors have brought up a few concerns. So, cool, thank you.
Okay, one question, and that's it.
I have a question and a statement, okay? To your question, you might want to go back and take a look at the state requirements of closing the landfill, because as I remember, the documentation that was presented when we closed the landfill, nothing could be built on that landfill for 50 years. 50. Okay, so to answer your question as far as selling it off and building something else on it, I believe there's a state requirement that you cannot do that, but you'd have to check that.
But we're at 40 years now, if 80s were the right date to close, so it's coming up pretty quick, which is why I asked.
Good point. My question is, again, based on what you brought up, you talk about the membrane of the landfill, and that area is not designed for heavy traffic. But now you're talking about bringing in, I would imagine, multiple pieces of equipment. Has there been any type of study on the impact of bringing in heavy loads on top of that landfill and the membrane itself? Will that shorten the life of the membrane? Could it puncture the membrane based on what's underneath it? These are questions I think need to be answered before you start thinking about bringing in heavy equipment, tractor trailers, fulls of panels, and other components.
You want to give it in? Because let me refer, Katie, you're online there. Could you just talk a little bit about your experience with Encore in terms of some of the landfills that you've worked on? And the town has provided all of the structural details and plans for their analysis of this. And so talk a little bit about some of the structural concerns, some of the construction concerns relative to the question you just had heard here.
Yeah, sure. Encore as a company focuses on brownfields and landfill solar array installation, development and installation. Generally, we've successfully installed a number of solar arrays in the Northeast on landfills that have been closed. My understanding of the construction process is that we don't drive massive equipment onto the landfill itself. We use skid steers, which are much smaller than the typical excavation equipment that you might be thinking of for large construction projects. They carry stuff up the landfill. There are stormwater regulations about when we can do that work, as far as what type of year. If it's super muddy, then we don't want to do that, because then we would risk damage to the landfill or safety hazards as well on the slopes and the equipment. We've done it successfully before. State level regulators have permitted us to do it before with strict requirements, and we've been able to do that. Eddie, I know that you have reviewed the as-built documents in pretty significant detail. Do you have any additional thoughts about the state's stance on that, or about landfill specs in general?
Yeah, Katie, I would just add the permitting that needs to get done for a project like this through the Solid Waste Bureau at NHDES. There is a construction quality assurance plan that would need to be attached to our permit that kind of steps through the types of equipment and processes used to build this, because that would be the state's intent, is to not damage any of the existing CAD materials. For this type of construction, low ground pressure equipment is required. So that type of equipment doesn't really exceed 8 PSI when it comes to ground pressure. So at those loads, you are really not impacting, the subsurface infrastructure of the cap. So those things are all taken into consideration as part of our permits with the state.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I got one more small series of questions. You've already answered Donna Frederick, and we haven't answered Jeannie Scott Russo yet. And so, George, you said just about 4 questions on here.
It's just not in.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I apologize, Mr. Chairman. Mike did send emails to Gene Russo and also to Donna Fredericks. Those questions were answered, yes. I apologize. Donna was online, that's why.
Got it.
Gene maybe...
So with that,
I think we're okay. Mike got the input, so we can go back internally with staff and talk and we'll get talk to the attorney on Friday. So Mike has feedback and from the abutters as well to.
and if anybody from the public has any constructive criticism, can send a letter to or email to Mike Fowler or to
Both of us are Liz.
Liz
Me,
Robidoux.
all three, whatever.
And it's the same thing for the board members. If we get any questions or suggestions, we can send them over to Liz. So with that, thank you very much
right,
for
thank you
coming in.
very much.
Very nice presentation. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to Planning Director and Chairman updates. The only one I have, and I want to address this to the alternates. Yeah, you believe you got a letter from Liz that even though your term may not be up, but there will be 2 positions for full membership on the board as of when do you guys get sworn in? As of Tuesday next week. So if you, let's see, John Morrison's up 2024. Christopher, you're up this time. And Richard Malaby, you're up in 2025, but you're alternate. So again, if you go on that that site that Liz had given you, then you can go for full membership if you really like to be on the board. And send the email, because that goes right over to Sheila Moderator. And she'll have it in the packet for the town council next week for suggestions on who can be appointed on here. So if there's 3 people, they got to choose 2.
So the council, will just to be clear, the council then chooses if all 3 said they wanted to be on, the council would choose 2 of the 3?
2 of the 3 from the alternates,
Okay.
right.
And to that same
They can't
point.
pull from, off the
Right.
cold turkey off the line.
And just to that point, for the public, I guess, is.
Yes, you can.
We did the same thing with
No.
Dave Bernice.
It's the only time the council is bound to pull from the alternates list is when a position opens up mid-session.
So others in the public can also apply, you're saying, because of this uniqueness? Okay. And I guess I was going to say it would be nice if others in the public applied for the alternate positions. I've always been of the thinking that alternates should be allowed to move up and then.
Mid-session.
So they won't be? We'll just have no alternates? Or can alternates apply now too? Because
No, alternates apply. People apply to be a member of the planning board.
So
Just like the zoning board.
whenever there's an opening.
No, every year, there are openings to every board and commission
Correct.
because someone's terms are up.
That's what I'm saying. So
So
I'm saying to the
members of the
public tonight, we'll need more alternates is my point. So please apply as the alternates.
Full board members, yes.
They could put either or on the application with Sheila.
Thank you. Just wanted to.
I have no comments. I'm good, Mr. Chairman. Our next meeting will be April 5th, which
Just
is...
want to make an announcement for people that may have a copy of the agenda. The public hearing that we're going to have from Eversource, they've asked to waive off on that, and we're going to be going April
19th.
to have them come in here to review the trimming of trees on English Range and Stark Roads. Understandably, they're out there working their buns off.
They're a tad busy.
So it's just, could we have a motion just to postpone it till April 19th for the record?
So moved.
Eversource.
So we have a motion, we have a second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstain, motion passes.
They've got less trees to trim after this storm.
I'm good. Motion to adjourn.
Chairman, is it
Motion to adjourn. I'm good. I don't have anything.
Did you have any comments?
Second.
So I'm going to make a comment, if you don't mind.
Did George, direct us, did you have any?
No, I have no...
Okay,
I am-
go ahead.
No, I know, Mr. Chairman, you announced in the beginning, the terms of David and I are ending. I just wanted to publicly thank all the members of the current planning board and all the past planning boards that I have had the privilege to serve on, and the members of the public. I think I called George today for a little stroll down memory lane, and I want to say, and I may be off a year, that my first year on the planning board was about 1994 or so, and I think I spent a couple of years off. So I think we're trying to find out the exact number, but our estimate is I've got about 25 to 26 years on the planning board since the early 90s, short of a couple times that I stepped off for a year or two. And I will not be coming back. I'm not asking to be the planning board liaison.
I was just going to say.
I am not asking to do that. It's, I think this is a great board. There's some absolutely fantastic people here sitting on the board and alternates, and I just want to say thank you to everybody up here and everybody I've had the privilege to serve with. It has been an absolute honor and pleasure to be a member of this board and help put together the plans and work with the citizens of Derry, and I just want to say thank you very much.
And I believe that
I might as well say something now, Mr. Chairman,
he
also.
has something to say.
I just want to thank everybody, too. I come into town, and I got on the planning board as an alternate 6 months after being in town, and I served as a secretary, vice chair, chairman for a long time. George has been through the whole time. I think Dave was on the board when I first got on. I think you were the chairman also, I believe.
Probably.
And, Jim's been on the board, John and Randy, and we have Liz and dealing with Mark and everybody else on the planning board. And it's been a great board, and I think this is one of the most important boards in town. If someone wants to get involved, to get on. I learned a lot. I like listening to people, and we have a great group of people, so I know leaving the board as a regular member and moving on to a council at large, I know that everything that we've worked on in the past 10, 15, 20, 30, whatever years it is, for the future, the planning board's in really, really good hands. And I just want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you to the public. Thank you to staff. Thank you for everybody for putting up for me for all those years. You never know, I might be back.
Going to take chair jealousy. Yeah, I was going to offer to continue to ask your granite question when you're not here.
I might bring that to the town council.
Any other member have anything to say?
Mr. Chairman, as my last motion, I'm going to make a motion to adjourn.
And I'll second that.
Oh, let Dave second it.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, abstain? Should probably have a roll call.
Good luck on the council, boys. Got a lot of work in front of you.
Did I tell you that?